Well, hello again, everyone. This is Ted Schmidt, Action Coach Northwest, and welcome to our Business Spotlight podcast. And this time, our guest is Derek Crain, co-founder and CEO of Mindful Therapy Group. So welcome, Derek.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted.
Absolutely. Looking forward to hearing your insights today. So let's just get going, jump right into the questions. First question for you today is, if you had to start from square one in business, what would you do differently?
If I had to start in square one in business, I think I would want to work on being a better storyteller. I think our business grew so fast and, we were operating the business for so long and growing it that we forgot to tell our story. We forgot early on to tell who we were. I think about one of my good friends who's the head of school at Seattle Academy in Capitol Hill High School there, Rob Phillips. He's such a good storyteller, and he gets you believing in the mission of the school and the learning of the school with the kids by his stories about the high school projects to Alaska and the fishing and seeing the wildlife there, but he always threads in the mission in his story.
Yeah. Well, people remember stories. They really do. That's a great way to do it. Awesome. Awesome. That is a very unique answer. Nobody's ever, ever said that one. That's good. I like that. Okay. Uh, what have your biggest learnings been as an employer since you began in business?
Oh my gosh, that's probably my greatest teacher being an employer because you learn right away if you want to retain your help. You're not going to go anywhere in business without your human resources. They're everything. And a lot of times, you just got to learn how to listen to your employees. What are their needs? What are their wants? And some of the things that they're asking for, you're not necessarily going to want to hear. But you need to be open-minded. You need to be flexible, and always tuning in. I would also say that one of my greatest teachers is when you have talent, you want to retain them. It never does you well to invest in training and teaching employees and then to turn around and leave. You
Mm,
always got to recognize when you have talent, you got to pay them for that talent. You got to see their trajectory at every level and reward them for their growth in your company. Because at the end of the day, they're serving you, and that talent is going to help you.
yeah, that's really, really key. So when you say retain, um, other than you mentioned reward them, pay them, do all that. Is there anything else that kind of comes to mind that really helps you retain your employees?
I think really, seeing them, meeting them where they're at, seeing what they need. Are they in a position where they're happy? Are they in a position where they're more operationally minded and they'd be better off on the ops team, or are they better in sales? Where their talents lie, and as you as a leader, are you assessing where their talents are, and do you have them in the right place?
In the right seat. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Awesome. Okay. What are some common misconceptions about running a business and how do you address them?
When I think about running a business, one of the things that I've learned and, misconceptions that if you want to grow, if you build it, they will come. Yeah, I mean, to some extent, some of that's true, but not if you're not set up right. I think about how we're growing in Texas, and the learning mistakes that we made when we grew into Arizona, Nevada, and Colorado. Um, Things that I would do differently. Like I would set up stronger relationships with the payers there so that we had more access to more clients there for the providers. One of the things that I think we did well when we grew in those states is we really went into those markets and we learned what the providers were wanting. We learned how the patients were, seeking healthcare. So we did a lot of market research. So I think really doing a needs assessment of the places that you want to grow into and really garnering and understanding what are the problems that you're solving for so that you will have a successful business. Now, we could go up and throw a location anywhere, but it wouldn't be really successful if we didn't know what we were working with.
Right. Do you find that different markets have different uniqueness that you have to approach it differently?
Oh my gosh, Ted. I mean, especially in mental health, Washington and Oregon are very similar in the way that patients seek healthcare, but it's a completely different complexion in Nevada. It's a completely different complexion in Arizona, and each state has their nuances that you really have to get to know. So if you come in with this sort of Washington mentality of all the things that we've learned in Washington, you bring that to Arizona, you're not going to have a lot of success.
Okay, yeah. One size does not fit all. I was thinking that's what you were gonna. Okay, yeah, I got it. Okay, so what do you attribute your growth to?
I think our growth has really been about really listening to our providers and their needs. We really have two sets of clients. One is the patient and patients who need to access mental health care. Obviously, there's huge demand for mental health care. But where a lot of companies go wrong, and especially since COVID, there's been a lot of companies that have entered this market with mental health. But where a lot of companies go wrong is they don't focus on the providers. And my thing, working in healthcare for so long, I remember, the message we always got from the top down in healthcare in the hospitals was, you got to focus on the patient. The patient's the most important thing. And while that's true, I remember a lot of nurses going hours without using the bathroom, developing urinary tract infections because they were so focused on the patients, they weren't focused on themselves, and then they would
Mhm.
burn out, right? So what happens when providers burn out? They can't provide that care. And so I think our philosophy has been to really focus on the providers, have a provider-centric, and providers, I mean mental health therapists, I mean nurse practitioners, I mean, psychiatrists. If the providers are taken care of with compensation, with balance, with autonomy of their own schedule, and they're happy, that sort of goes down to the patient, and the patient feels taken care of. So,
Yeah,
and I would also say, you know, again, going into your markets, there's so many people in this field now that are expanding so fast. A lot of these companies out there are in 50 states, and they're going to be in, you know, 30 more by whatever date. We've always been methodical about our growth and, be really thoughtful about how we're growing and what problems we're solving, as I mentioned before, in each state.
yeah. So do you find that is it difficult to find providers when you go into a new market, or is that you have that figured out?
I don't think it's necessarily difficult, but I think when you're looking for providers in each state, you have to figure out what are they looking for? What do they want? What do they want in that state? What's the culture of the provider in that state?
Yeah, I was curious about that. Very true on taking care of them, though. I can see that. If they're not in a good space, it's hard for them to be a good provider, right? That kind of thing,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, how do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. And I gotta be honest with you. I don't always do a good job at that. My wife and I run this company together, and I'm the CEO and she's the CEO, COO. She's got a great operational mind, and I'd be lying to you if I said that business doesn't come home with us. It does. And I remember, watching this entrepreneur panel at SAS, the place where my kids go to school, and a lot of the great leaders up there being really vulnerable and talking about how really obsessed you have to be with business. And I appreciated that vulnerability because in a lot of ways, when you're growing a company and as fast as we are, you have to be obsessed. But it's not that I'm encouraging being obsessed. What I will say though is you're never gonna, when you're compulsive about getting problems solved at home, you're never gonna cure that itch. So you have to become comfortable with some level of being feeling out of control. And that's okay. That's part of your growth. That's part of your learning. So while I would say at times I'm obsessed, I really try to work on my compulsivity around business and having good boundaries at home with my wife.
So it's almost as if you feel like you just disconnect a little bit, and you got to let go of that control.
You really do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're never gonna be able to control everything. You just
Yeah. Wow. That's good. I like that. Okay. What qualities, you've already talked about this a little bit, but what qualities do you look for in employees, and how do you foster a positive and productive work environment?
Man, I always say this is the best employees I have, and I say this to every new employee that I meet or encounter, or even when I'm interviewing, is the employee who listens, the employee who shows up as a learner. The most respectable trait. They may not have a lot of experience, they may not have a particular skill you're looking for, but geez, if they show up as a learner, I'm enamored with that sort of spirit. And then, sort of nurturing a good environment, I think is connecting with your employees. You're never too big, even at my level, to go down and connect uh, no job is too dirty for me. If I need to get on the phone or if I need to, clean up a spill, you want to be there and you want to connect with your people. Every employee at every position is important. You want to connect with them and to be looking at career pathing every one of them because every employee has talent. Every employee has is deserving to move up, and you want to keep people motivated to grow.
I like that career path. Yeah, absolutely. Where do they want to go? And so, and do you find some of them kind of like what I've found over the years is some of them kind of like to stay where they are. They get comfortable and they like that. They excel there, and they may not want to, go to a higher level, but others have a lot of ambition and do want to go to a higher level. So you have to provide that opportunity.
You
Is that
bet. I mean, we have several employees that have been in their positions for 8 years, and I remember a long time ago when I worked for Costco, and I was making $9 an hour pulling carts, and my manager saying, "I'm not going to continue to pay you $9 to pull carts. You need to come up and be a cashier." And I'm like, "But what if I want to pull carts for $9 an hour?"
yeah.
And it's that same mentality is like some people are just happy pulling carts, and that's okay too. But you
Yeah.
at least want to go to them with that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Wow, we're sailing on. Only two questions left here. So what questions should I be asking you that I haven't?
Oh my gosh, what question should you be asking me that you haven't? I'm kind of stumped at that one, if I'm being
That's
honest.
okay. That's okay.
Um, Gosh, I don't know. I would say, maybe I would talk a little bit about our growth trajectory, or I don't know.
Good. If it helps, maybe what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, or if you could only give one piece of advice to someone, what would it be? Who's a business owner?
If I could only give one piece of advice to somebody, it would be to do what you love to do as a business owner. Because whatever you find that you love, you're going to find out how to make whatever that craft is better. You're going to look to business to me is all about problem solving.
Mhm.
And problem solving comes from, really loving how to do something. If that's making scrambled eggs, there's a way to problem solve for fluffing them up and having them taste better. So doing things you really love to do.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot to be said for that. Okay, last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And any words of advice for other business owners who are looking to grow their business?
In 5 years, I hope that we are still operating this business. Um, and we are in probably, I would guess we're in 15 to 18 states. And we're operating this business in the same way, going at things in a methodical way, solving problems for different states and providing mental health care access to, thousands of patients. Um, and continue to solve problems. What I feel like I love about business, it's kind of like, you have those architects that build those beautiful homes for themselves, and then all of a sudden they up and leave, and you go, why did they build that home that they loved and they bragged about and they talked about for years, building a home, and they left? And the answer is they're looking for another problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that's what I love doing. That's what my wife loved doing. That's why we're always involved in multiple projects, even outside of, this mental health business. Um, and I guess the advice that I would give is that, business is ongoing, right? It's not this point A to point Z. It's learning about yourself is, and I mentioned that whole thing about do the stuff you fall in love with, because the stuff you fall in love with is the stuff that you're going to want to solve problems for.
Yeah, business never stops, does it?
It really doesn't.
And I was having a conversation with a client earlier, and it just explained, when you're a business owner, it's kind of like a lifestyle. I mean, it's always there. It never stops. So no matter what you're doing, it doesn't stop. So that kind of thing. Well, anyway, awesome. I got some great notes here. Thank you to Derek Crain, the co-founder and CEO of Mindful Therapy Group, for being our guest today on our Business Spotlight. Thank you,
Thank
Derek.
thank you for having me.
Absolutely.